My name is Denise Robinson. I am 68 years old, and tonight I sit alone in a hotel room 300 miles from home, listening to the sound of champagne glasses clinking through the wall. They are celebrating. I am not. 6 hours ago, I stood in the back row of a university auditorium, watching my daughter receive her master's degree in architecture. She wore the emerald dress I sent her last month. She looked radiant. She looked proud. She looked past me as though I were a stranger holding the wrong sign at an airport. When she walked toward me after the ceremony, I opened my arms. She leaned in close, not for an embrace, but to whisper, "Don't stand near me during the reception. You don't know how to behave." Her breath smelled like mint. Her tone was ice. I nodded. I always nod. Then I watched her walk toward a group of women in tailored blazers and pointed heels. They kissed her cheeks. They held her hands. They took photos under the oak tree, where the light was golden and forgiving. I stood by the parking lot. 1 hour later, the dean of the college took the microphone at the garden reception. He talked about gratitude. He talked about generosity. He talked about the anonymous donor who had funded the entire event, the catering, the venue, the scholarships, the string quartet now playing Vivaldi under a white tent. He said the donor had requested to remain unnamed for years. But tonight, he said, she had agreed to be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our most generous benefactor, Mrs. Denise Robinson. I heard my daughter's glass hit the ground. I walked slowly across the lawn. The grass was damp. My heels sank slightly with each step. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me, but I only looked at one person. My daughter stood frozen near the fountain, her mouth half open, her hands clutching the emerald fabric at her waist. I climbed the 3 steps to the platform. The dean handed me the microphone. It was heavier than I expected. I looked out at the crowd, at professors, at students, at parents holding phones up to record this moment. Then I looked at my daughter, and I said 3 words. "You're welcome, sweetheart." I handed the microphone back. I walked down the steps. I got into my car. I drove 17 miles to this hotel. I have not spoken to anyone since, but I need to tell this story now. Not because I want pity, not because I want revenge, because I want you to understand how a mother can give everything and still be told she is not enough, and how, sometimes, silence is the loudest answer. This is my confession. I need to take you back, not to explain, not to justify, but because you cannot understand the weight of those 3 words unless you know what came before them. 23 years ago, I held my daughter for the first time in a county hospital where the fluorescent lights hummed too loud and the air smelled like disinfectant and hope. She was 6 pounds, 4 ounces. She had my nose. She had her father's silence. He left when she was 11 months old. No note. No forwarding address, just an empty closet and a phone number that stopped working after 3 days. I was 25. I had a high school diploma, a studio apartment with a kitchenette the size of a bathroom, and exactly $843 in my checking account. I remember the exact amount because I wrote it down on the back of an envelope the night he left. I stared at that number for an hour, trying to make it multiply in my mind. It didn't, so I did what women like me have always done. I worked. I cleaned houses during the day while my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, watched my daughter for $5 an hour and leftover casserole. I waitressed at night at a diner off Route 70, where truckers left $2 tips and sometimes asked if I wanted company. I always said no. I was home by 2 in the morning. I slept 3 hours. I woke to my daughter's laughter, this bright, bubbling sound that made everything else disappear. She loved mornings. She would stand in her crib, her hair wild and tangled, and reach her arms up toward me. "Mama up," she would say. "Mama up." I still hear that voice sometimes when I can't sleep. By the time she was 4, I had saved enough to start a small cleaning business. Just me and one van I bought, used from a church auction. I called it Robinson Home Services. I printed flyers at the library and left them in mailboxes across 3 counties. Within 2 years, I had 12 employees. Within 5, I had contracts with 4 corporate office buildings and 2 hospital complexes. I worked 16-hour days. I missed school plays. I missed parent-teacher conferences. But I never missed a tuition payment. Not once. My daughter grew up in the back offices of buildings I cleaned. She did her homework on desks that weren't ours. She fell asleep in waiting rooms while I vacuumed boardrooms at midnight. When she was 7, she drew me a picture. It was a stick figure woman holding a mop, and next to her was a little girl holding a book. At the top, in crooked letters, she wrote, "My mom is the hardest working person in the world." I framed it. I hung it above my desk. She threw it away when she turned 16. By then, I had sold the cleaning business to a national franchise for an amount I will not say out loud, even now. It was enough. Enough to buy a house with a porch, enough to pay for her college without loans, enough to stop working nights. But by then, something had shifted. She started correcting my grammar. She stopped inviting me to meet her friends. She asked me not to come to her high school graduation because, she said, I wouldn't understand the speeches. I went anyway. I sat in the back row. I clapped when they called her name. She pretended not to see me. I told myself it was a phase. Teenagers push away. They come back. That's what mothers tell each other over coffee and forced smiles. So I waited. I paid for her undergraduate degree at a private university, 8 states away. I paid for her study abroad semester in Barcelona. I paid for her graduate program in architecture at the school where tonight she told me I didn't know how to behave. And when the dean contacted me 2 years ago asking if I would consider sponsoring the department, I said yes, not for recognition, not for applause, because I wanted her to have the kind of graduation I never did, the kind with flowers and music and parents who take 1,000 photos and cry in all the right moments. I wanted her to feel celebrated. I just didn't realize she needed me to be invisible for that to happen. The fracture didn't happen tonight. It didn't even happen this year. If I'm honest, and I promised myself I would be honest in this telling, the fracture started 7 years ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, in the kitchen of the house I bought with money she never asked about. She was home from college for fall break, 21 years old, still young enough that I believed we could repair what was breaking between us. I had made her favorite meal, roasted chicken with rosemary, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans almondine. I set the table with the good plates, the white ones with the gold rim that I bought after the business sold, because for the first time in my life, I could buy something beautiful just because it was beautiful. She came downstairs at 6:15. She was on her phone. She sat down without looking at me. "How was your day, sweetheart?" I asked. "Fine. Did you get to see any of your friends from high school?" "Mom, I told you, I don't really keep in touch with people from here anymore." She said, "Here," the way you'd say, a gas station bathroom. I passed her the potatoes. She took a small spoonful. She was scrolling through something on her screen. Photos, maybe, or messages. Her thumbs moved fast. "Could you put the phone away while we eat?" I asked. My voice was gentle. I was always gentle. She looked up then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her face I had never seen before. Contempt. "You know what, Mom? Not everyone sits in silence at dinner like it's 1950. Some of us have connections. Some of us have lives that don't revolve around this house." I felt the words land somewhere in my chest, not my heart, lower, deeper. "I just wanted to have a conversation with you," I said. "About what? About how hard you worked? About how you sacrificed everything?" "I know the story, Mom. I've heard it 1,000 times. I've never said that to you. You don't have to. It's in everything. The way you look at me, the way you hover, like I owe you something." I put my fork down. My hands were shaking. I folded them in my lap where she couldn't see. "I don't think you owe me anything," I said quietly. She stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, a sound like nails on wood. "Then stop acting like it." She left the kitchen. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I heard her bedroom door close. I sat at that table for 2 hours. The chicken went cold. The candles I had lit burned down to nothing. When I finally stood to clear the plates, I noticed she had barely touched her food. That was the first time I understood. My daughter was ashamed of me, not of what I had done, of who I was. The shame had roots. I started seeing them everywhere once I knew to look. When she was 16, I attended a parent event at her private high school, the one I was paying $40,000 a year for. I wore a navy dress from Macy's and the pearl earrings my mother left me. I thought I looked appropriate, presentable. My daughter met me in the parking lot before I could walk into the building. "Mom, you can't wear those shoes." I looked down. Black flats. Comfortable. Clean. What's wrong with them? They're old. You look like someone's housekeeper. The word hung between us. Housekeeper. The thing I had been. The thing that had paid for everything she now took for granted. I am someone's housekeeper, I said. I was yours. She flushed red. That's not what I meant. But it was. There were other moments. Small fractures that spread like cracks in glass. The time she was 18 and brought a boyfriend home for dinner. He was polite, well-dressed, studying economics at Yale. His father was a surgeon. His mother was a professor. We sat in the living room making small talk. He asked what I did for work. Before I could answer, my daughter said, "She's retired." Not, "She built a business from nothing." Not, "She worked 2 jobs to give me opportunities." Just, retired. As though I had simply stopped existing one day, and that was the end of the story. The boyfriend nodded politely and changed the subject. I said nothing. I smiled. I offered him more coffee. That night, after he left, I asked her why she hadn't told him the truth. "Because it's awkward, Mom. What am I supposed to say? My mom used to clean toilets? You could say I owned a company. You could say I employed people. You could say I provided a service that helped families and businesses." She rolled her eyes. "You don't understand. In his world, it's not impressive. And in your world?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The week before her graduate school graduation, she called me. I was in my garden, planting tulip bulbs for the spring. My hands were covered in soil. I wiped them on my jeans and answered on the 3rd ring. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something." Her voice was strained, formal. The voice she used when she was about to ask me for money but didn't want to sound like she was asking. "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" "The graduation ceremony is going to be kind of a big deal. A lot of important people are going to be there. Donors, board members, some recruiters from major firms." "That's wonderful." "Yeah. So, I just want to make sure you know how to, present yourself." I stopped digging. I looked at the tulip bulb in my hand, pale, papery, holding the promise of something beautiful beneath the surface. "What do you mean?" "I mean, dress appropriately. Don't talk about yourself too much. If people ask what you do, just say you're retired. Don't bring up the cleaning business." There it was again. The cleaning business. As though those 2 words were something to bury. "Why would I bring it up?" I asked. "You know how you get. You start talking about the old days, and people don't get it, Mom." "Get what?" She sighed, the kind of sigh that said I was exhausting her. "Just try to blend in, okay? I've worked really hard for this degree. I don't want anything to distract from that." I wanted to ask, what could I possibly do that would distract from your achievement? But I knew the answer. I was the distraction. My existence was the problem. "I'll do my best," I said. "Thanks, Mom. Love you." She hung up before I could say it back. I sat in the garden for a long time after that. The sun moved across the sky. The soil dried on my hands. And I made a decision. If she wanted me invisible, I would be invisible. But I would also do one other thing. I would tell the truth. 3 days before the graduation, I received a call from Dean Whitmore. He was the head of the School of Architecture. His voice was warm, grandfatherly. "Mrs. Robinson, I wanted to reach out personally to thank you again for your extraordinary generosity. The students have no idea how much you've done for them." "That's how I prefer it," I said. "I understand. But I also want to extend an invitation. We traditionally recognize our major donors at the commencement reception. It's entirely optional, of course, but it would mean a great deal to the faculty if you would allow us to acknowledge your contribution." I thought about my daughter's voice on the phone. "Don't talk about yourself too much." I thought about the boy from Yale and the lie she told. I thought about the dinner table where I sat alone while her food went cold. "Will my daughter be there?" I asked. "Of course. She's one of our top graduates. She'll be seated in the front." "Then yes," I said. "I'll accept." "Wonderful. We'll keep it brief. Just a few words from you if you'd like." I'd like that very much. When I hung up, my hands were steady. The fracture was complete. Now came the fall. "I want to tell you that I am a good mother. I need you to believe that, even if my daughter doesn't." Because in the 3 days between that phone call with Dean Whitmore and the graduation ceremony, I convinced myself that I had misunderstood everything. that I was being too sensitive, that the distance between us was normal, natural, simply what happens when a child grows up and away. Mothers do this. We rewrite our pain into something smaller, something we can carry without collapsing. I told myself she was stressed. Graduate school is demanding. She had a thesis to defend, job interviews to prepare for, a future to build. Of course she was short with me. Of course she seemed distant. She was focused, ambitious. I had raised her to be this way. I told myself she didn't mean it when she said I didn't know how to behave. She was nervous about the ceremony. She wanted everything to be perfect. That's not cruelty. That's just a daughter wanting her mother to shine the way she believed mothers should shine. Quietly, politely, without drawing attention. I told myself that when she was younger and said I embarrassed her, she was just being a teenager. All teenagers are mortified by their parents. It's developmental, necessary even, a way of separating, of becoming. I told myself the lie about the cleaning business, calling it retirement instead of ownership, was her way of protecting me. Maybe she thought people would look down on me if they knew. Maybe she was trying to spare me judgment. I told myself all of this while I stood in front of my closet the morning of her graduation, trying to decide what a woman wears when she wants to be invisible but might be seen. I chose a charcoal gray suit. Simple. Expensive, but not showy. Pearl earrings, low heels. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, this is a woman who blends in. This is a woman who knows her place. I drove the 3 hours to the university listening to a podcast about interior design. I didn't hear a single word. My mind kept replaying the conversation I imagined having with my daughter after the ceremony. In this imagined conversation, she would see me in the audience. She would smile, really smile, the way she used to when she was small and I picked her up from daycare. She would run to me after walking across the stage. She would say, "Mom, I'm so glad you're here." And I would hug her, and the fracture would heal. I played this scene over and over in my head until I almost believed it was real. I arrived at the campus 2 hours early. I didn't want to be late. I didn't want to cause a disruption by walking in after the ceremony started. The auditorium was already filling with families, mothers in bright dresses, fathers in blazers, siblings holding bouquets wrapped in cellophane. Everyone looked proud. Everyone looked like they belonged. I found a seat in the back row, near the side exit. I placed my purse on my lap. I folded my hands. I waited. The graduates began to file in, walking 2 by 2 in their black robes and emerald green hoods. I searched for my daughter in the procession. I spotted her near the middle, tall, poised, her hair swept into a low bun. She looked beautiful. She looked past me. The ceremony lasted 90 minutes. I clapped when they called her name. I watched her cross the stage, shake the dean's hand, accept her diploma. She smiled for the photographer. She looked radiant. She didn't look into the audience. Not once. Afterward, families poured out onto the lawn for the reception. I followed the crowd, staying near the edges. I watched my daughter from a distance. She was surrounded by friends, professors, people who kissed her cheeks and held her shoulders and laughed at things she said. I waited for her to turn, to look for me, to motion me over. She didn't, so I walked toward her. She saw me coming. I know she did because her spine straightened and her smile tightened, and she leaned toward the woman next to her and whispered something. When I reached her, I said, "Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." She barely looked at me. "Thanks." One word, flat, final. I tried again. "You look beautiful. The ceremony was lovely." "Yeah, it was nice." She glanced over my shoulder, clearly looking for an exit from this conversation. That's when I realized she wasn't going to introduce me to anyone. She wasn't going to include me in her celebration. I was an obligation she was trying to fulfill as quickly as possible. So I leaned in. I kept my voice low. "Is there somewhere we can take a photo together?" She stiffened. "Mom, I'm really busy right now. There are people I need to talk to." "I understand. I just thought..." "Please." She cut me off. Her eyes were hard. "Don't stand near me during the reception. You don't know how to behave." Then she turned her back to me. And I stood there, in the middle of a garden full of families celebrating their children, and I understood with perfect clarity. My daughter was ashamed of me. Not ashamed of something I had done. ashamed of who I was, of where I came from, of the work that had brought her to this moment. I should have left then. I should have walked to my car and driven home and let her have her perfect day without me. But I didn't, because 1 hour later, Dean Whitmore took the microphone, and everything I had told myself, every justification, every excuse, every careful lie, shattered. I need you to understand what happened in the hour between my daughter telling me I didn't know how to behave and the moment Dean Whitmore called my name. I walked away from her. I walked past the fountain where water trickled over smooth stones. I walked past clusters of families taking photographs under the oak trees where the late afternoon light fell in golden shafts through the leaves. I walked past tables laden with champagne flutes and tiny sandwiches cut into triangles and fruit arranged in perfect geometric patterns. I walked until I reached the far edge of the lawn, near the parking lot, where the celebration became background noise. I stood there watching. A mother adjusted her son's hood while his father took 17 photos from different angles. A grandmother held a toddler on her hip and pointed toward a graduate in the distance, saying, "Look, that's your uncle. Wave to uncle." A group of siblings formed a tight circle around their sister, arms draped over shoulders, heads tilted together. Someone's phone held high to capture all of them at once. Families, complete, uncomplicated, celebrating together without shame. I watched my daughter from across the lawn. She moved through the crowd like she had been born to this. Easy laughter, graceful gestures, the kind of confidence that comes from never questioning whether you belong. A woman in a cream-colored dress approached her. They embraced. They spoke for several minutes, heads close together. The woman touched my daughter's arm 3 times during the conversation. Light taps of affirmation, intimacy, familiarity. I wondered if that was one of her professors, or perhaps the mother of a friend, someone who mattered, someone who fit. My daughter threw her head back and laughed at something the woman said. It was a full-throated laugh, unguarded and genuine. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in years. Not around me, anyway. I looked down at my hands. The pearl ring my mother gave me before she died caught the light. I twisted it around my finger, once, twice, 3 times. An old habit when I needed to steady myself. I thought about leaving. I had my keys in my purse. My car was 30 feet away. I could slip out before anyone noticed, drive back to the hotel, order room service, pretend this day had never happened. But something kept me rooted there. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the voice of my younger self, the woman who worked 2 jobs and slept 3 hours a night and refused to break no matter how heavy the weight, telling me, "You have every right to be here." So I stayed. At 6:45, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon and the string quartet transitioned from Vivaldi to something I didn't recognize, Dean Whitmore stepped onto a small wooden platform near the center of the lawn. He was a tall man in his mid-60s with white hair and a navy blazer. He held a microphone in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. He raised the glass, and gradually, the crowd quieted. "Good evening, everyone. If I could have your attention for just a moment." The conversations faded to murmurs, then silence. I was still standing near the parking lot, too far away to be seen clearly, but close enough to hear. "First," Dean Whitmore said, his voice warm and practiced, "I want to congratulate our extraordinary graduates. You've worked tirelessly for this moment, and we couldn't be more proud of what you've accomplished." Applause rippled through the crowd. I saw my daughter clapping along, smiling, her champagne glass catching the light. "These celebrations don't happen by accident," the dean continued. "They require resources, planning, and above all, generosity. Tonight's reception, the venue, the catering, the music you've been enjoying, all of this has been made possible by a donor who has supported our program for the past 2 years." I felt my pulse quicken. This individual has chosen to remain anonymous during that time, asking for no recognition, no fanfare. She simply wanted to ensure that our students could focus on their education without financial burden, and that nights like tonight could be everything they deserved to be. My daughter's smile had frozen slightly. She was still clapping, but slower now, mechanical. "But tonight," Dean Whitmore said, "she has agreed to let us thank her publicly, and I think it's important that you all know who has made this possible." The crowd was silent now, except for the rustle of fabric, the clink of a glass being set down on a table. In addition to funding tonight's celebration, this donor has established 3 full-ride scholarships for incoming students, contributed to the renovation of our design studio, and personally covered the costs of study abroad programs for 12 students over the past 2 years. I saw heads turning, people whispering. Someone asked, "Who is it?" My daughter had stopped clapping. She stood very still, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean Whitmore said, "please welcome to the stage our most generous benefactor, Mrs. Denise Robinson." For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard it, the sharp crack of glass hitting stone. I looked toward the fountain. My daughter's champagne flute lay shattered on the ground near her feet. Her hand was still raised in the air, fingers curved around nothing. Her face had gone completely white. Around her, people began to clap. Polite applause, uncertain at first, then building. Heads turned, looking for me. I started walking. The grass was damp from the afternoon watering. My heels sank slightly with each step, making small punctures in the perfect lawn. I walked past the fountain where my daughter stood frozen. I walked past the woman in the cream-colored dress who was now staring at me with her mouth slightly open. I walked past tables full of people I didn't know who had eaten food I had paid for. The applause grew louder. I climbed the 3 steps to the platform. My right knee ached, arthritis I'd developed from years of kneeling to scrub floors. I didn't let it show. Dean Whitmore extended his hand. I shook it. His palm was warm and dry. He handed me the microphone. It was heavier than I expected, cold metal against my fingers. I adjusted my grip and looked out at the crowd. 200 faces stared back at me, but I only looked at one. My daughter stood near the fountain, her arms wrapped around herself as though she were cold. Her mouth was still open. Her eyes were wide, stunned, darting from me to the dean to the crowd, as though searching for an explanation, a way to make sense of what was happening. I saw the exact moment understanding hit her. Her face didn't crumble. It hardened. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Not with sorrow, but with something else, anger. She was angry that I was standing here, angry that I had been revealed, angry that her carefully constructed world, where I existed only as a vague shadow called retired, had just been shattered along with her champagne glass. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I spoke. "You're welcome, sweetheart." 3 words. I didn't say, "I paid for your education." I didn't say, "I funded this entire event so you could have the celebration you deserved." I didn't say, "I have given you everything and you gave me shame." I didn't have to. Those 3 words contained all of it. The crowd erupted into applause, real applause this time, enthusiastic and sustained. People were standing. Someone whistled. I saw professors nodding, parents clapping harder, students wiping their eyes. My daughter didn't move. I handed the microphone back to Dean Whitmore. He was beaming, saying something I couldn't hear over the noise. He shook my hand again, held it with both of his, mouthed the words, "Thank you." I nodded. Then I walked down the 3 steps, across the lawn, past my daughter who still hadn't moved, past the broken glass glittering near her feet, past the families who parted to let me through. I walked to my car. I got in. I closed the door. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't cry. I started the engine and drove. 17 miles to the hotel. I counted everyone. I checked in under a name that wasn't mine, something I had arranged ahead of time just in case I needed to disappear. The clerk handed me a key card. Room 412, 4th floor, end of the hall. I rode the elevator alone. The mirrors showed me a woman in a gray suit with perfect posture and dry eyes. I barely recognized her. Inside the room, I sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't order room service. I simply sat in the silence and let the truth settle over me like dust. My daughter had spent 7 years trying to erase me, and tonight I had made myself impossible to ignore. But here's what I didn't know yet. Here's what I wouldn't discover until the next morning, when I finally turned on my phone and saw the 43 missed calls and the 17 voicemails and the text messages that had come through while I sat in this room listening to champagne glasses clinking through the wall. The moment I drove away, my daughter ran after me. She reached the parking lot just as my taillights disappeared around the corner. She stood there in her emerald dress and her expensive heels, breathing hard, her hands shaking. Then she went back to the reception, and she told everyone I was lying. Chapter 6. Revelation. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hotel room chair by the window, watching headlights move along the highway in the distance, long streams of white light going somewhere, red taillights leaving. I thought about how simple it must be to be a light, to have only one purpose, one direction, no complicated history. At 3 a.m, I finally reached for my phone. I had turned it off in the car, a deliberate choice. I didn't want to hear it ring. I didn't want to see her name appear on the screen. I needed silence to understand what I had just done. But now, in the dark, I needed to know. The phone took a long time to power on. The screen glowed blue in my hands. Then the notifications began. 43 missed calls, 17 voicemails, 62 text messages. My hands were steady as I opened them. I had expected this. What I hadn't expected was who they were from. 3 calls from my daughter. The rest were from numbers I didn't recognize. I started with the voicemails. The first was from Dean Whitmore, time-stamped 8:37 in the evening, less than 2 hours after I left. Mrs. Robinson, this is Richard Whitmore. I'm calling because, well, there's been some confusion after you left tonight, and I wanted to reach out personally. Could you please call me back when you get this? My cell number is... His voice was strained, careful, like a man trying not to step on a landmine. I skipped to the next one. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. Hi, Mrs. Robinson. This is Catherine Chen. I'm a professor in the architecture department, and I was at the reception tonight. I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry for what happened after you left. What your daughter said was completely inappropriate, and several of us wanted you to know that we don't believe her. Please call me if you need anything. My chest tightened. What your daughter said. I listened to the next voicemail, then the next, then the next. They were all saying the same thing, in different words, with different levels of outrage. Your daughter told people you were lying. She said you weren't really the donor. She said you were mentally unwell and seeking attention. She said Dean Whitmore had made a mistake. By the 4th voicemail, my hands were shaking. By the 7th, I had to put the phone down. I stood up. I walked to the bathroom. I turned on the cold water and let it run over my wrists, something my mother taught me to do when I was young and overwhelmed. Cool the pulse points, she used to say. It calms the heart. My heart wasn't calming. I dried my hands. I went back to the phone. I opened the text messages. The first 3 were from my daughter. The first arrived at 9:47 in the evening. Mom, where did you go? 4 minutes later. Mom, answer your phone. 7 minutes after that. I need to talk to you right now. No apologies. No acknowledgement of what she had said to me before I went on that stage. Just demands. I scrolled past them. The next message was from a number I didn't recognize. It came at 10:15. Mrs. Robinson, this is James Hartley, father of one of the graduates. I wanted to personally thank you for your generosity and tell you that what happened tonight after you left was disgraceful. Your daughter owes you an apology. I hope you're okay. Then another, arriving at 10:22. Hi, Mrs. Robinson. This is Dr. Patricia Okonkwo from the faculty. I'm horrified by what I witnessed tonight. Please know that the entire department stands behind you and is grateful for everything you've done. We'd like to speak with you when you're ready. Then another, and another, and another. Parents, professors, even some students, all saying the same thing. We're sorry. We believe you. What she did was wrong. I sat down on the edge of the bed and read every single message. It took me 40 minutes. By the end, I understood what had happened after I left. According to the messages, and I pieced this together like assembling a puzzle in the dark, my daughter had stood near the fountain after I drove away, surrounded by people who were asking her questions. Your mother is so generous. You must be so proud. Did you know she was the donor? And my daughter, backed into a corner by a truth she couldn't control, made a choice. She lied. One professor wrote, "She told us you had mental health issues and a tendency to insert yourself into situations for attention. She said Dean Whitmore must have been confused, that you'd maybe donated a small amount once and were exaggerating your involvement. She said she was embarrassed and asked people not to encourage your delusions." Also another message from a parent. Your daughter actually suggested that the university should fact-check the donation records because she was certain there had been a mistake. She said it loudly enough that at least 30 people heard her. A student wrote, "She told my mom that you'd always been difficult and that she'd been dealing with your behavior for years. She made it sound like you were unstable. I wanted you to know that a lot of us didn't believe her. It didn't add up. It didn't add up because Dean Whitmore was standing right there. According to multiple messages, he had overheard what my daughter was saying. He had walked over to the group. He had very calmly, very firmly, said something that made several people gasp. One parent's message spelled it out. Dean Whitmore told everyone that there was absolutely no confusion. He said you were the primary benefactor and that the university had extensive documentation. Then he said the actual amount you'd contributed over 2 years, over $400,000. Mrs. Robinson, the silence that followed was deafening. $400,000. I had asked him to keep the exact amount private, but he said it anyway. He said it because my daughter had forced his hand. One parent wrote, "The look on your daughter's face when he said that number. I've never seen someone go that pale. She just stood there. She didn't apologize. She didn't say anything. She just walked away. But before she walked away, she did one more thing. A professor's message. She said very quietly, to those of us still standing nearby, 'She did this to humiliate me.' Then she left. I read that line 3 times. She did this to humiliate me. Not, I was wrong. Not, I shouldn't have lied. Not, I'm ashamed of how I treated her. Just, she did this to humiliate me." I sat with that for a long time. My daughter believed that my years of anonymous giving, the scholarships, the renovations, the reception she was currently enjoying, had all been part of some elaborate scheme to embarrass her on her graduation day. She couldn't conceive of another reason. She couldn't imagine that I had simply wanted her to have something beautiful, that I had funded her education and her celebrations because I loved her, that I had remained anonymous because I didn't need credit. I only needed her to be happy. No. In her mind, I was the villain. I was the unstable mother who sought attention. I was the woman who didn't know how to behave. And when I finally stood on that stage and accepted recognition, when I became visible after she had spent years trying to erase me, she experienced it not as gratitude, but as an attack. I closed my eyes. I thought about the little girl who used to draw me pictures, the one who wrote, "My mom is the hardest working person in the world," in crooked letters. I thought about the teenager who threw that picture away, and I thought about the woman who stood on a lawn tonight, surrounded by the evidence of my love, and called me a liar. At 4:30 in the morning, I opened the voicemail from Dean Whitmore again and listened all the way through this time. His voice was careful, measured, but I could hear the anger underneath. "Mrs. Robinson, I want to apologize for what happened after you left. Your daughter's behavior was completely unacceptable, and I addressed it directly with her before she departed. I also want you to know that I've spoken with several faculty members and parents who witnessed the incident, and there is unanimous support for you and condemnation of what transpired. We are documenting everything, and I want to assure you that this will not reflect poorly on you in any way. Please, call me. We need to speak about how to move forward. And Mrs. Robinson, thank you. For everything. You deserved a better evening than this." I saved the message. Then I listened to one more voicemail. This one from a number with my daughter's area code, but not her number. A young woman's voice. Hi, Mrs. Robinson. You don't know me, but my name is Leah Brennan, and I was your daughter's roommate during undergrad. I heard about what happened tonight, and I wanted you to know that she's talked about you before. To me, I mean. And the things she said were not kind. She used to tell people that you were nouveau riche and didn't understand class. She'd make jokes about how you used to clean houses, and she'd say it like it was something shameful. I never understood why she was so angry at you. You put her through school. You gave her everything. I just thought you should know that tonight wasn't a one-time thing. She's been like this for a while. I'm really sorry." The voicemail ended. I sat in the dark hotel room, holding the phone against my chest, and I finally let myself feel it. Not sadness, clarity. My daughter hadn't made a mistake tonight. She hadn't panicked or spoken in the heat of the moment. She had revealed who she had become. Someone who valued image over truth. someone who would rather destroy her mother's credibility than admit she had been loved extravagantly, someone who experienced generosity as humiliation because she couldn't control the narrative. I had spent years telling myself that she was young, that she would grow out of her shame, that someday she would look back and understand. But tonight, I saw the truth. She wasn't young anymore. She was 28 years old, a graduate student with a master's degree, a woman who had stood in front of 200 people and called her mother a liar rather than say, "Thank you." And I realized something else. I had been waiting for her to see me, but she had been seeing me all along. She had seen a mother who cleaned toilets and she decided that was shameful. She had seen a mother who built a business and she decided that wasn't impressive enough. She had seen a mother who gave everything and she decided it was a debt she didn't want to owe. The problem was never that she didn't see me. The problem was that she saw me exactly, and she wished I were someone else. At 5:45 in the morning, as the sky outside began to lighten from black to deep blue, I made a decision. I wasn't going to call her back. I wasn't going to explain myself. I wasn't going to defend my choices or apologize for existing. I was going to let her sit with what she had done, and I was going to do something I hadn't done in 28 years. I was going to put myself first. I picked up my phone and composed a single text message, not to my daughter, to Dean Whitmore. "Thank you for your kindness last night. I'm taking some time away. Please continue the programs as planned. The students deserve support regardless of what happened. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." "Denise," I hit send. Then I turned off my phone again. I lay down on the hotel bed, still wearing the gray suit from the night before, and I watched the sunrise through the window. It came slowly, the way truth always does. First a thin line of gold along the horizon, then orange spreading across the sky, then pink, then finally full light. By the time the sun was completely up, I had stopped shaking. By the time room service knocked on my door with the coffee I hadn't ordered, I was ready. Ready to stop waiting for my daughter to change. Ready to stop explaining who I was to someone who had decided I wasn't enough. Ready to understand that sometimes love isn't returned the way we give it, and the only person who needs to believe in our worth is ourselves. I drank the coffee slowly. I watched the world wake up outside my window, and I let my daughter go. I stayed in that hotel room for 3 days, not because I was hiding, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to feel the full weight of what had happened before I could decide what to do next. People don't talk about this part. The part after the revelation, the part where you sit alone with the truth and let it crush you until you understand its exact shape and size. On the first day, I ordered room service twice, toast and coffee in the morning, soup in the evening. I couldn't taste either one. I ate because the body requires fuel, even when the heart is empty. I took a shower that lasted 45 minutes. I stood under water so hot it left my skin red, and I cried for the first time since leaving the reception. Not loud, dramatic crying, just tears that fell while I stood very still, my forehead pressed against the tile wall. I cried for the mother I had been at 25, working 2 jobs and sleeping 3 hours a night, who believed that sacrifice would be enough. I cried for the little girl in the crib who said "Mama up" with her arms reaching toward me. I cried for the woman I had become at 68, successful, independent, alone, who had built an empire and lost a daughter in the process. But mostly, I cried because I finally understood something I had been avoiding for 7 years. My daughter didn't just resent me. She hated me, and the hatred wasn't new. It hadn't started at the graduation. It had been growing quietly for years, fed by every achievement she earned that reminded her of where she came from. On the second day, I turned my phone back on. 117 new messages. I didn't read most of them, but I read the ones from my daughter. There were 8 in total, spread across 2 days. The first came at 11:20, the morning after the graduation. "Mom, we need to talk. You embarrassed me in front of everyone I know. That was cruel." I stared at that word, cruel. The second message arrived 2 hours later. "People are asking me questions I can't answer. Why didn't you tell me you were donating that much money? You made me look like an idiot." The third, that evening. "I don't understand why you did this. If you wanted recognition, you could have told me privately. You didn't have to make a scene." I read that one 3 times. If you wanted recognition. as though the past 2 years of anonymous giving had been a performance building to this moment, as though I had funded her education as a trap. The fourth message came the next morning. Dean Whitmore told me he invited you to speak. You could have said no. You chose to do this. Yes, I did choose. I chose to stop being invisible. The fifth message. People think I'm a terrible person now. Do you know what that feels like? I almost laughed when I read that. Almost. Because yes, I knew exactly what it felt like to have people think you're terrible. I had spent years watching my daughter treat me like something shameful while I smiled and pretended it didn't hurt. The sixth message was shorter. Fine. Don't answer. I guess this is how it's going to be. The seventh came 12 hours later, late at night. I could tell because the tone shifted. She had been drinking, maybe, or she was tired, or both. I never asked you to sacrifice everything for me. You always act like I owe you something. I don't. I didn't ask to be born. I set the phone down after reading that one. I walked to the window. I looked out at the parking lot where cars came and went. People checking in and checking out, living their temporary lives in this temporary place. I didn't ask to be born. It's the cruelest thing a child can say to a parent. Not because it's untrue. She's right, she didn't ask. But because it reduces 28 years of love to an inconvenience she had to endure. I thought about the night she was born, how I held her in that county hospital and promised her I would give her everything I never had, how I meant it with every molecule of my body. I thought about the mornings I woke at 5 to clean office buildings so she could sleep in a warm bed. I thought about the parent-teacher conferences I missed because I was working 3 jobs to pay for the private school she now couldn't wait to distance herself from. I thought about the college applications I helped her write, the scholarship essays, the late-night phone calls during her freshman year when she was homesick and crying, and I stayed on the line until she fell asleep. I thought about every birthday cake I baked from scratch because I couldn't afford the bakery, every Halloween costume I sewed by hand, every Christmas where I worked overtime so she could have gifts under a tree. I didn't ask to be born. No, sweetheart, you didn't. But I asked you to stay. Every single day of your life, I asked you to stay. And you did. And I was grateful. Until the day you decided I was too small for your big life. The 8th message was different. It came on the 3rd morning, and it wasn't angry. Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. Can we please talk? I'm coming to the hotel. I read it twice. Then I looked at the timestamp. It was sent at 9 in the morning. It was now 9:45. She was probably already here. My first instinct was panic. I wasn't ready. I hadn't prepared what to say. I was still wearing yesterday's clothes, and my hair was unwashed, and I looked exactly like the woman she had always been ashamed of. Then I stopped myself. I looked in the mirror above the desk. I saw a 68-year-old woman with gray hair and lines around her eyes and hands that had scrubbed floors and built companies and held a daughter who no longer wanted to be held. I saw myself, and I realized I didn't need to prepare. I didn't need to rehearse. I didn't need to make myself smaller or prettier or more palatable. I just needed to tell the truth. The knock came at 10:15. 3 sharp raps, confident. The knock of someone who expected to be let in. I walked to the door. I looked through the peephole. My daughter stood in the hallway wearing jeans and a white sweater. Her hair was pulled back. She wasn't wearing makeup. She looked young, vulnerable, almost like the girl I used to know. Almost. I opened the door. We stared at each other for a long moment. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. "Hello? Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked past me into the room. I caught the scent of her perfume, something expensive, floral, the kind I could never afford when she was young. She stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed, looking around as though taking inventory. The unmade bed, the empty coffee cups, the gray suit I had worn to her graduation draped over the chair. "You've been here for 3 days?" she asked. "Yes. Why didn't you go home?" I needed time to think. She nodded slowly. Then she turned to face me. "Mom, I'm sorry. I am. I was shocked when Dean Whitmore called you up, and I didn't handle it well." I said nothing. I shouldn't have said those things after you left. I was embarrassed and I panicked and I said things I didn't mean. "Which things didn't you mean?" I asked. She blinked. "What? Which things didn't you mean? That I was mentally unwell? That I was seeking attention? That I was exaggerating my involvement? Which part was the lie exactly? Her face flushed. I was upset. People were asking me questions and I didn't know what to say. You could have said thank you. Silence. You could have said, my mother has been incredibly generous. You could have said, I'm grateful for everything she's done. You could have said nothing at all and just let me have that one moment. It wasn't just one moment, Mom. You made a spectacle. And there it was, the truth underneath the apology. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry that other people had witnessed it. A spectacle, I repeated quietly. You know what I mean? No, I don't. Explain it to me. She sighed, that same exhausted sigh she had been giving me for years. Mom, you have to understand. I've worked really hard to build a reputation in this field, to be taken seriously. And then you come in and what? Pay for your education? Fund your program? Make sure you had everything you needed to succeed? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I just wish you had told me before, so I could have been prepared. Prepared for what? For people knowing. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart, something deeper. The foundation I had built my entire life on. The belief that if I loved her enough, worked hard enough, gave enough, it would eventually be enough. You didn't want people to know I was your mother, I said. It wasn't a question. That's not. You didn't want them to know where you came from. You wanted them to think you did this on your own, that you earned it, that there was no cleaning woman in your past who sacrificed everything so you could have a future. Stop, her voice cracked. Just stop. Why? Because it's true? Because hearing it out loud makes you uncomfortable? Tears were streaming down her face now. You don't understand what it's like. You don't know how hard it is to what? To have a mother who isn't impressive enough, who doesn't fit into your world. Yes, the word burst out of her. Yes, okay? Is that what you want to hear? You don't fit, Mom. You never have. And I've spent years trying to explain you to people, trying to make you sound different than you are. The room went very quiet. I looked at my daughter, this beautiful, educated, accomplished woman I had raised, and I saw a stranger. Different than I am, I repeated softly. What am I exactly? She wiped her eyes. That's not what I meant. What am I, sweetheart? Say it. I want to hear you say it. Mom, say it. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, her voice was barely a whisper. You're working class. You're uneducated. You don't understand the world I'm trying to build a life in. There it was. The truth I had known but never heard spoken. I was an embarrassment. Not because of anything I had done wrong, but because of who I was, what I had been, where I came from. I was the stain she had been trying to scrub away, and nothing I could ever give her would change that. I walked to the window. I looked out at the morning light. I want you to leave now, I said quietly. Mom, I want you to leave, and I don't want you to contact me again. You don't mean that. I turned to face her. I do. I mean it more than I've ever meant anything. Mom, please. I said I was sorry. You're not sorry. You're embarrassed that people saw who you really are. There's a difference. She was crying fully now, her shoulders shaking. Please don't do this. You're my mom. You're all I have. No, I said gently. I'm not all you have. You have your education, your degree, your reputation, your impressive friends. You have everything I worked my entire life to give you. And apparently, that's all you ever wanted from me. That's not true. Isn't it? She didn't answer. I opened the door. Goodbye, sweetheart. She stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down her face, waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. Finally, she walked to the door. She stopped in front of me. I do love you, Mom. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt nothing. I know you think you do, I said, but love doesn't feel like this. She left. I closed the door behind her, and for the first time in 28 years, I was free. I checked out of the hotel room 3 hours after my daughter left. I folded the gray suit. I packed my small suitcase. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking back at the room where everything had changed. Then I drove home. The 3-hour drive passed in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need distraction. I needed to sit with what I finally understood. My daughter didn't hate me because I had failed her. She hated me because I had succeeded. I had taken a life that began with nothing, a single mother in a studio apartment with $843, and I had built something from it. I had worked, I had sacrificed, I had climbed, and every step I took upward reminded her that she had started at the bottom. That's what she couldn't forgive. Not the sacrifices I made, not the hours I worked, not even the wealth I eventually earned. She couldn't forgive me for being proof that we came from nothing. In her world, the world of educated professionals and inherited confidence, poverty was supposed to be invisible. It was supposed to stay in the past, buried and unspoken. But I was living evidence. Every time someone asked where she came from, every time her background came up, there I was, the cleaning woman who became a business owner, the high school graduate who put her daughter through private universities. I was her origin story. And she wanted to rewrite it. She wanted a mother who had always been elegant, who had always known which fork to use, who could talk about summer homes and European vacations and boarding schools. She wanted a mother who matched her aspirations. Instead, she got me. When I arrived home, the house was exactly as I had left it. The garden needed watering. The mail had piled up. Everything was quiet. I walked through each room slowly, seeing it differently now. This was my house, bought with money I earned, decorated with furniture I chose. Every corner of it was mine, and I had never needed anyone's approval to live here. Why had I spent so much of my life seeking my daughter's? I sat at the kitchen table, the one I had set with good plates and roasted chicken 7 years ago, where she told me I didn't understand. And I realized I had been waiting for permission to be proud of myself, permission from the daughter I raised, permission to say, I built this, I survived, I succeeded. But she would never give me that permission, because my pride would require her to acknowledge where we started. And she had spent too many years pretending we started somewhere else. The clarity didn't hurt the way I expected it to. It felt more like relief, like finally setting down something heavy I had been carrying for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. I didn't need her to see me anymore. I could see myself, and what I saw was enough. 2 weeks passed before I opened my laptop. I spent those days in my garden, planting bulbs that would bloom in spring. Tulips, daffodils, hyacinths, things that require you to bury them in darkness before they can grow toward light. I didn't check my phone. I didn't read emails. I simply worked the soil with my hands and let time do what time does. It kept moving forward whether I was ready or not. On the 15th day, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table and opened the email I had been avoiding. From Dean Whitmore. Subject line: a conversation when you're ready. I clicked it open. Dear Mrs. Robinson, I hope this message finds you well, though I suspect these past weeks have been difficult. I want you to know that the faculty and I have had extensive discussions about what occurred at the graduation reception. What your daughter did was unacceptable, and it has prompted us to examine how we honor our donors and protect them from exactly this kind of treatment. I would very much like to speak with you about the future of your scholarship program and how we can ensure your generosity is recognized in a way that feels right to you, not to anyone else. You owe us nothing, Denise. But I hope you'll allow us the opportunity to make this right. With deep respect, Richard. I read it twice. Then I composed a reply. 3 days later, I sat across from Dean Whitmore in his office on campus. The walls were lined with architectural drawings, student projects, I assumed, buildings that existed only on paper, dreams rendered in precise lines. He poured us both tea. His hands were steady, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for the honesty in your email. He nodded. Denise, I need to tell you something. After that night, several faculty members came to me. They told me things they had witnessed over the years, small comments your daughter made, ways she distanced herself from you at university events. We should have seen it. We should have protected you better. You couldn't have known, I said. Perhaps, but we can do better going forward. He set down his teacup. I want to ask you something, and please know there is no wrong answer. Do you want to continue funding the scholarship program? I looked out the window at students crossing the quad, young people carrying portfolios and backpacks, their whole futures spread before them like blueprints waiting to be built. I do, I said, but not the way it was. Tell me what you need. I took a breath. I want the scholarships to go to students who come from working-class families, first-generation college students, people who cleaned houses or waited tables or did whatever they had to do to get here. I want them to know that someone who started where they started believes in them. Dean Whitmore was writing this down, nodding. And I want my name on it, I continued. Not because I need recognition, but because those students should know that the woman funding their education used to clean the buildings they're studying in, that she didn't inherit wealth or marry into it, that she built it with her hands and her will. I want them to know that's possible. The Denise Robinson Scholarship Fund, he said quietly. Yes, for students who understand that there is no shame in hard work. Exactly. He looked at me for a long moment. Your daughter will see this, when we announce it, when it's published in the university newsletter and on our website. She'll know. I know. And you're prepared for that? I thought about the girl in the crib who said, "Mama up." I thought about the woman in the emerald dress who said, "You don't know how to behave." I thought about everything in between. I'm not doing this to hurt her, I said. I'm doing this because those students deserve to know their stories matter, that where they come from isn't something to hide. Dean Whitmore reached across the desk and shook my hand. Then let's build something that lasts. The announcement went out 3 weeks later. I saw it on the university website, accompanied by a photo of me they had taken in the garden. Casual, smiling, my hands resting on the table where I had sat alone so many times. The Denise Robinson Scholarship Fund, supporting first-generation students from working-class backgrounds. The article told my story, not the sanitized version, the real one. How I was a single mother at 25, how I worked as a housekeeper and built a cleaning company from nothing, how I sold that company and used the proceeds to ensure students like me, students who didn't come from wealth or connections, could pursue their dreams without drowning in debt. The article included a quote from me. There is no shame in hard work. There is only shame in forgetting where you came from. Within 48 hours, the article had been shared across social media. Alumni were commenting. Students were reaching out. 3 major donors contacted the university to add to the fund. And my phone started ringing. I didn't answer when I saw her name. The first call came at 9 in the morning, 2 days after the announcement. Then another at noon. Then another that evening. On the 4th day, she left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled. Mom, I saw the announcement. I need you to call me back. We need to talk about this. What you wrote, people are asking me questions. Please call me. I deleted it. The next voicemail was angrier. I can't believe you did this. You're telling the entire world our private business. You're making me look like... Just call me back, Mom. Please. I deleted that one too. The third voicemail was different. Her voice was quieter, almost broken. Mom, I know you're upset with me. I know I hurt you. But this feels like punishment. Everyone in my field is going to see this. Everyone is going to know. Is that what you want? To humiliate me? I listened to it 3 times. Then I deleted it. Because she still didn't understand. This wasn't about her. This was about every student who would receive that scholarship and know they weren't alone. Every young person who worked 2 jobs and wondered if they belonged in higher education. Every mother who sacrificed everything and was told it wasn't enough. This was about reclaiming my story. And if my daughter felt exposed by the truth, that was her burden to carry, not mine. 6 weeks after the announcement, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, thick cream-colored paper. A return address I didn't recognize. I opened it at the kitchen table. Dear Mrs. Robinson, my name is Sophia Martinez. I'm a first-year architecture student, and I just found out I'm receiving the Denise Robinson Scholarship. I wanted to write to thank you, but also to tell you something. I almost didn't apply to this program. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. My mother cleans offices at night. My father works construction. When I told my high school counselor I wanted to study architecture, she said people like us don't do that. But then I read about your scholarship. I read your story. And I realized that someone who started exactly where I'm starting believed I could do this. I'm not embarrassed anymore, Mrs. Robinson. I'm proud. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for telling the truth. With gratitude, Sophia, I held that letter for a long time. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer where I used to keep my daughter's childhood drawings. This, I thought, is what justice feels like. Not revenge, not punishment, just truth, spoken out loud, changing lives. I am 70 years old now. It has been 2 years since I stood on that stage and said 3 words that changed everything. People ask me sometimes if I have regrets, if I wish I had handled it differently, if I think about what I lost. I always tell them the same thing. You cannot lose what was never truly yours. My daughter and I have not spoken since that morning in the hotel room. Not because I am angry, not because I am punishing her, but because I finally understood something that took me 68 years to learn. You cannot force someone to see your worth. You can only decide whether you will see it yourself. In the beginning, her silence felt like abandonment. I would wake in the night and reach for my phone, wondering if she had called, wondering if she had finally understood, wondering if love could be enough to bridge the distance between who I was and who she needed me to be. But as the months passed, something shifted. I stopped waiting. I stopped wondering. I stopped measuring my worth by whether my daughter could recognize it. And in that space, that quiet, empty space where her approval used to live, I found something I had been searching for my entire life: peace. The scholarship fund has grown beyond anything I imagined. We have awarded 23 full scholarships in 2 years, 23 students who came from backgrounds like mine, housekeepers and construction workers and factory employees and single parents working multiple jobs to survive. I meet with them once a semester. We have dinner at a restaurant near campus. They tell me about their projects, their struggles, their dreams, and I tell them the truth. The road will be harder for you than it is for others. People will underestimate you. Some will look down on you. Some will expect you to be grateful just to be in the room. But you belong there, not because someone gave you permission, not because you erased where you came from, but because you earned it with every hour you worked, every sacrifice you made, every time you chose to keep going when it would have been easier to stop. Your past is not a burden. It is your foundation. Build something beautiful on it. Sophia Martinez, the first student to write to me, graduated last month. She asked me to come to her ceremony. I almost said no. The last graduation I attended ended with my daughter's champagne glass shattering on the ground and my heart breaking in ways I didn't know were possible. But Sophia called me herself. "Mrs. Robinson," she said, her voice nervous but determined. "I wouldn't be here without you. I need you there. Please." So I went. I sat in the audience and watched her walk across that stage. I watched her accept her diploma with tears streaming down her face. I watched her parents, her mother in a dress she had clearly bought just for this occasion, her father in a suit that was slightly too big, stand and cheer so loudly the people around them laughed. After the ceremony, Sophia found me in the crowd. She threw her arms around me and whispered, "Thank you for everything, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." I held her and thought, this is what it feels like to give love to someone who knows how to receive it. This is what it feels like when sacrifice is met with gratitude instead of shame. This is enough. I have not heard from my daughter directly, but I know she knows. The scholarship has been covered in architectural journals. It has been featured in university newsletters. One of the students won a national design competition and mentioned my name in her acceptance speech. My daughter would have seen all of it. I imagine her sitting in her apartment, probably beautiful, probably expensive, probably everything I worked to give her, seeing my name attached to words like philanthropist and advocate and inspiration. I imagine her realizing that the mother she tried to hide has become impossible to ignore. I don't know if that brings her pain or pride or something in between. And the truth is, I don't need to know. Her feelings about me are hers to carry now, not mine to manage. Last week, I received a package in the mail. No return address, postmarked from the city where my daughter lives. Inside was the framed picture she drew when she was 7. The stick figure woman holding a mop, the little girl holding a book, the crooked letters that said, "My mom is the hardest working person in the world." The frame was different, older, worn, like it had been stored somewhere for a long time. There was no note, no explanation, just the picture. I stared at it for a long time. Then I hung it back on my wall, not because I think it means she has changed, not because I think it is an apology, but because it reminds me of a truth I never want to forget. I was always enough, even when she couldn't see it, even when I doubted it myself. I was always enough. I still work in my garden most mornings. The tulips I planted after that night in the hotel have bloomed and died and bloomed again. Each spring they return. Each spring they are a little more beautiful than the year before. That is what growth looks like. Not a single moment of transformation, but small, quiet returns. Seasons of darkness followed by seasons of light. I am in a season of light now. I have friends, real friends, who know my whole story and love me because of it, not in spite of it. I have students who call me on my birthday and send me photos of their graduation projects. I have a life that is full and meaningful and entirely my own. And yes, there is still a small, tender place in my heart where my daughter lives. I think there always will be, because I am her mother. And that love, complicated and painful and unreturned as it is, does not simply disappear because it is not reciprocated. But I have learned to hold it differently now, not as a weight, not as a wound, but as something that belongs to me, something I gave freely, something that made me who I am. I loved her with everything I had, and even though she could not love me back in the way I needed, I do not regret that love, because it taught me how to love myself. Where are you listening from, I wonder? Are you in your car, driving home from work? Are you lying in bed, unable to sleep? Are you sitting in a quiet room, trying to make sense of something that broke you? Maybe you are a mother who has given everything and been told it was not enough. Maybe you are a daughter who is just beginning to understand the cost of your mother's sacrifices. Maybe you are simply someone who knows what it feels like to be invisible to the people who should see you most clearly. Wherever you are, I want you to hear this. Your worth is not determined by whether others recognize it. Your story is not shameful, even if someone made you feel like it was. Your love, given freely, honestly, without condition, is never wasted, even when it is not returned. You are enough. You have always been enough. And the moment you believe that, truly, deeply, without needing anyone else to confirm it, is the moment you become free. I am 70 years old now. I am a mother who lost her daughter but found herself. I am a woman who built something from nothing, twice. Once with my hands, once with my heart. I am a housekeeper who became a philanthropist. I am a sacrifice that became a legacy. And I am at peace. Not because my story ended the way I hoped. Not because I got the apology I deserved. Not because my daughter finally saw me. But because I stopped waiting for her to. And I saw myself instead. If you found something in this story that resonated with you, if you heard yourself in my words or felt less alone in your pain, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not for me, but for them. Because somewhere there is a mother working 3 jobs who thinks she is failing her children. Somewhere there is a daughter who will one day regret the way she treated the woman who gave her everything. Somewhere there is a person who believes their past disqualifies them from their future. And they need to know, it does not. You are not your beginnings. You are what you built from them. Tell that story. Live that truth. And when the people who were supposed to love you cannot see your light, do not dim it. Shine anyway. My name is Denise Robinson. I am 70 years old, and I am enough.